Dear students, welcome to Approach IAS. Today we will discuss the major terminology regarding inflation, but only in brief and general concept. In later lecture, we will discuss in broad way. Firstly, inflation, disinflation, deflation, reflation, and stagflation, skewflation, and yflation. These are the terms, and we have to discuss in general concept. What do you mean by inflation? So first of all, we have to suppose general price suppose the price of 1 kg apple is 100 rupees. The price of 1 kg apple is 100 rupees. It means 100 rupees is the general price of 1 kg apple. If this price became 120, 140 or 150, it means the general level of price increases from 100 to 140, 150. We can say that increase in the general price of goods and services. What is inflation? Inflation is increase in the general price of goods and services. Apple is good. We can also say that more flow of money in the market or expansion of money is called inflation. Expansion of money, first 100 rupees, but later gradually increase to 140 and 150. Persistent increase in the general price of goods and services. Persistent increase in the general price of goods and services. 100 to 120, 140, 150. It means the price of 1 kg apple is increasing gradually. We can also take an example. Supply and demand. Here, the goods and services, or we can say the supply of goods and services, supply of goods and services increase or decrease. The supply of goods and services in inflation is either stable or decreased. Decreased why? When we purchase before inflation 1 kg apple in 100 rupees, but after inflation we have to pay 140, 150 rupees for 1 kg apple. It means goods, supply of goods and services in inflation is stable or decreased. It means demand of goods and services increase, demand of goods and services increase, and value of goods and services increase. So if there is a statement regarding an inflation, the demand of goods and services reduce, decline in inflation, then it is wrong, because in inflation demand of goods and services increase and value of goods and services increase. But in money, it was in the case of goods and services, but in case of money, supply of money increase or decrease. Before inflation we had to pay 100 rupees for 1 kg apple, but after inflation we have to pay 140 or 150. It means more supply of money, or if there is more supply of money, it means less demand and less value. In other words, we can say that in inflation the value of money decreased because of more supply of money. There is an important fact that purchasing power. The purchasing power decrease or increase. The purchasing power of consumer decreased because before inflation 1 kg apple we have to pay 100 rupees, but at present we have to pay 140 or 150. It means more money we have to pay. Then middle class and consumer class have to pay more money. It means purchasing power decreased. We can also understand this supply and demand. If you have a close friend and you met him regularly, it means the supply of the supply, there is more supply. If there is more supply, then your relation became more formal, and your demand, if there is a more supply, just such as money, then your relation became more formal. यानी आपके डिमांड क्या है? Your demand became less and your value became also less. But in case of goods and services, such as if you met your friend in a month, in a 6 month, in a 1 year, it means your demand end value remain high. So here we can say कि increase in the general price of goods and services as compare their demand is called, or we can say increase in the general price of goods and services is called inflation, and in inflation or persistent increase in the general price of goods and services is called inflation. We can also say that in inflation the supply of money or more supply of money but less supply of goods and services. Expansion of money. Here we can say expansion of money is also called, more expansion of money is also called inflation. Next term is disinflation. Disinflation. What do you understand by disinflation? Disinflation means it is a stage of inflation, and we try to reduce the rate of inflation. Reduce, it means 150, 240, 120, 100. It is called disinflation. Disinflation. Reduction in the rate of inflation it is a tool by which we try to reduce the increased level of prices of goods and services. We try to reduce 150 to 120, 110, 100. But gradually, there is some gradually reduction or decreased in the rate of or prices of goods and services. We can also say in inflation there was more supply of money. It means less value of money and less supply of goods and services, more demand and more value of goods and services. But here in this inflation we try to provide more supply of goods and services to reduce the rate of 1 kg apple or to reduce the prices, the general prices of goods and services. We can also say opposite of reflation. Further we will discuss what do you mean by reflation. Here we can take an example. If suppose 5% of inflation, retail or wholesale price index, so 5% inflation in January 2020. 5% inflation rate. But in February 2020, it was reduced to 4%. It means the rate of inflation rising, increasing, but it was reduced to 5 to 4%. Here also, the rate of the prices of goods and services increasing 150, 140, 120. But we are 100, but they are 150, 140, 120. It means the rate of goods and services increasing, but it reduced to 100, 100. So we can say that in this inflation is in a stage of inflation by which we try to control, by which we try to reduce the rate or the general prices of goods and services gradually. Next, we will discuss deflation. It is a very important term, deflation. Deflation means opposite of inflation. Opposite of inflation. Why we say deflation is the opposite of inflation? See here, in inflation, the general price was increased to 100 to 140 and 50. But in case of deflation, it was reduced to 100, 180, 40, 50. It means in inflation, more supply of money, but in deflation, less supply of money. Suppose you go to market and the price of 1 kg apple is 40, 50 or 30 rupees per kg, while the general price was 100 rupees. But there is a 40 or 50, 60 rupees per kg. It means the general price falls below 0%. Then we can say in deflation, the rate of inflation is to or decreased to 0, decrease below 0%, 0% or 0 become reduced to 0, below 0. It means negative inflation. Negative inflation is also called what? Negative inflation is also called deflation, opposite of inflation. In inflation, supply of goods and services less, demand high, value high. In inflation, supply of money. Inflation, supply of money, high demand money, value of money reduced. But in deflation, supply of goods and services, in inflation we have to pay 100, 140, 150, 130 rupees for 1 kg apple. But in case of deflation, we have to pay 40, 50, 30 rupees for 1 kg apple. It means supply of goods and services more, demand less, value less. Bus money supply less 40, 50. In inflation 140, 50. Money value more, money demand more, and money value is also high in case of deflation. Then deflation is an opposite of inflation. Please listen in brief. Deflation is the opposite of inflation. In inflation, the value of goods and services is high because of less supply of goods and services. It means in inflation, less supply of goods and services compared to their demand. More supply of money and less value. But in deflation, less supply of money, it means more value, and more supply of goods and services, it means less value. And then we will discuss next topic. Next, reflation. What do you mean by reflation? It is also a stage of inflation. Opposite of disinflation. Why opposite? Why we can say it is an opposite of disinflation? See, in deflation, we saw the price of 1 kg apple reduced to 100, 80, 40, 50, 30. In reflation, we try to raise the price, general level of price of goods and services. Raised the general level of prices of goods and services. Raise the general level of prices of goods and services. Because there is, in deflation, the prices of goods became very low, falls below 0%. Then less supply of money in case of deflation, and more supply of goods and services. We have to balance. Then try to increase more supply of money. More supply of money in reflation. by administrative or monetary policy. Then we can say reflation is a stage of inflation. It is opposite of disinflation. Disinflation, in disinflation, we try to reduce the rate of the general level of prices of goods and services. But here we increase the general level of price. 30 say 40, 50, 90, 100. It is called reflation. Then we will discuss stagflation. Then stagflation. Stagflation. What is stagflation? Stagflation, it is an economic scenario in which an economy faces both high inflation and low growth rate at the same time. High inflation and low growth rate at the same time. We can also say that stagnant growth plus inflation equal to stagflation. Stagflation. We can say that stagflation is a stage of inflation in which we can say that stagflation is an economic stage in which inflation in one sector of an economy and unemployment in another sector in an economy, such as in agriculture sector, there is inflation. In real estate, there is situation of unemployment. It is called stagflation. In case of agriculture sector, we have to reduce the interest rate. We have to increase interest rate, and in real estate, we have to reduce interest rate. Stagflation was firstly recognized. It was first recognized during the decade of 1970 by different developed countries in form of inflation as well as unemployment due to oil crisis. It was also in news in India in 2019, November 2019, when former Prime Minister of India, Dr. Manmohan Singh, wrote in the Hindu and warned that Indian economy entering in the stage of stagflation. He also described that in December 2019, retail price index was 7.35%. Maximum after 2014 July. Growth rate was 4.5 in two quarter of 2019 and 20. Unemployment rate was 6.1%. It means slow growth rate, but high inflation, high unemployment rate. It is called a stagflation. Next, skewflation. Skewflation. Skewflation is a new term. It was introduced, it is believed that it was introduced by Kaushik Vasu. Kaushik Vasu, former Vice President of World Bank and Chief Economic Advisor of Indian government. Skewflation is a phenomena in which high inflation in one sector or one particular sector, while in other sector there is no changes or economy faces deflation. It means high inflation in one sector, in another sector deflation or no changes is called skewflation. Inflation in one sector, but another sector there is no changes or deflation. In 2009 and 2010, last month of 2009 and initial months of 2010, we saw the example of the stage of skewflation in Indian economy, where wholesale price index or non-food items inflation rate was 3%, while food inflation was about 20%. It means high inflation in one sector. High inflation in one sector and deflation in another sector. We can also take an example of 2010, the beginning month of financial year of 2010. The general price of food grains, pulse was more. The general price of food grains, pulse, etc. were high, but later months it was decreased, it was stable. But in case of sugar, milk, cabbage, the inflation rate was high. It means there was a high inflation in cabbage, some food articles, and deflation or no changes in another sector. Then skewflation. Next and last concept is biflation. The term was first introduced by expert analyst of Phoenix Investment Group, Osborne Brown, in the beginning of 21st century. Biflation means there is a high inflation in commodity products, items. High inflation. But in case of assets and non-essential items, less demand or low demand is called biflation. Some economists also told that in biflation there is inflation in one sector and deflation is another sector. Such just like stagflation, such as skewflation, but there is difference, and in biflation there is a commodity items, the price of commodity items high, but assets, the word is used, assets, there is identified sector, assets and non-essential goods, the demands of non-essential goods is low, is less, is called biflation. Thank you, dear friends. We will meet next lecture.